Hi, how you doing? This is John Quimby. We're here at the Mideast Sunday Conversation. I'm sitting down with Coach Vaughn from the University of Maryland. Coach Vaughn, you're going into your first season with Maryland. Can you describe to us the road that you've taken to get into the position you are today?
Yeah, I played 4 years of baseball at Kansas State. My last couple of years, really fortunate to have a couple of really influential coaches in my life, and Sean McCann and Andy Sawyers. It really, kind of got me on the path to thinking about coaching. Before I got a chance to play with the White Sox, after my senior year, I was planning on staying around and coaching, being a student assistant after that. I was fortunate enough to get a chance to play and play for 2 years when, Andy called me and said, "Hey, we got a spot for you. Are you interested?" I said, "Absolutely." So I went back to Kansas State as a volunteer, finished up my degree. Really got into coaching, learned a lot from those guys in that year I was there. And Andy left to go down to Texas A&M, be the associate head coach down there, and John Sheff came in from University of Kansas. And Coach Sheff and I really had a good relationship from day one. Real good guy to work with. Legitimately could not ask for a better boss. I don't think there's a better one out there. And so it's one of those things. We built a good relationship. When he took the head job at Maryland, he said, "Rob, you'd be interested." Didn't have to think twice, So came over in August and been grinding out with him ever since.
Great. And you mentioned you played at Kansas State. You actually helped them go to their first ever NCAA Tournament appearance. Can you describe that situation for us?
Yeah, it was something I'll never forget. They are by no means a powerhouse yet, but they've really, that coaching staff, Coach Hill's done a great job over there. They've really turned the program around, and it's really neat to be able to look back and know that I was a part of that. Building relationships with guys that outside of baseball that I talk to each and every day. Some are still playing pro ball, some are coaching, some are just out there working. But the relationships we built in and man, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And that's kind of what we're preaching to our guys in Maryland. It's a very similar situation, and I'll tell you what, there's not much better feeling than the legacy you leave when something like that happens, and you can look back knowing you were a part of it.
Yeah. You played with the Chicago White Sox in their organization. What was the experience? What was the feeling like when you realized, you accomplished one of your lifelong dreams of being a professional baseball player?
It's kind of surreal, to be honest with you. When I was sitting at home, I was back in Houston, Texas. I was sitting at home. My mom was out in the garage. She was working on some stuff, and I was sitting in there listening to names being called on the internet. Had the computer open, not even remotely expecting mine to be called on the second day. And I was sitting there, and I went over to look at the computer to see where it was at, and it was in the last round. There was a couple picks left. It's in the 30th round, so the last round of the second day. And, I was sitting there and said, with the White Sox select Robert Vaughn, catcher out of Kansas State. And I just froze. It was a very, very surreal moment. And I don't really remember this whole thing. My mom told me, I just went walking out to the garage and basically told her, I said, "Mom, I just got drafted." She obviously teared up and went all excited and stuff, And, I was never going to play in the big leagues, and I understood that. But the lessons that I've learned from their catching rover, John Orton, was one of the most influential catching guys I've ever been around. The stuff I learned from him, the knowledge I learned, the way of interacting with guys, from Ryan Newman, one of my managers I had, Chris Crone, another manager I had. Lessons I've learned to them that I use with our guys every day. And not all of it is baseball skill stuff, but it is the way you manage people, the way you handle people, the way to treat people. And like you said, it was a dream come true. Even though I was a career backup, really, I was a backup for 2 years. It was something I wouldn't trade for anything.
Good. Now you were a catcher. You worked closely with the catchers. You've obviously had tons of experience with catchers, as you mentioned. What are the types of qualities or kind of ingredients you look for in a catcher?
I think the biggest thing is you got to be a leader, or you really want them to be the leader. The catcher needs to be the leader of the team. A guy to hold guys accountable, no matter who it is, whether it's your best player, your worst player, holding them accountable. You'd like to see that out of your catcher. I look for guys that have a lot of energy, regardless of what the score is, regardless of how hot it is. Guys that play hard, guys that get after in that regard. And obviously the measurable attributes. Everybody wants to throw 1-9s to second base. Everybody wants to do all that. But I want a guy that can really catch. I want a guy that really receives the ball well, because ultimately that's going to make our pitching staff better. It doesn't matter how good you throw if you get a guy that butchers balls back there and they're constantly on the ground, constantly at the backstop. Your pitching staff's not going to be very successful. And, in this game, as much as I hate to give pitchers credit, pitchers and pitching and defense wins games for you. It's a huge aspect of it. If you put a guy back there they can't handle that, you're not going to be very successful. So that's my first and foremost. I can teach a guy to block. I can help a guy's arm strength a little bit. But I look for a guy that can really, really catch. If they can do that, we can make it work.
Good. Well, lastly, if you had one piece of advice for someone sitting at home, maybe not necessarily a catcher, but maybe a high schooler, shortstop, outfield, whatever. They wanted to play at the Division I level, maybe the professional level. What piece of advice would you give them?
I think the biggest thing for me, what my whole coaching philosophy is built around, what I do with our guys on a daily basis that is non-negotiable. To me, there's a lot of stuff in coaching that you don't want to make guys cookie cutters. There's a lot of things. There's one thing for me that is hands down that you got to have, and that's that nobody in the country will play harder than we will. That's my goal when we go. We open up at LSU this year. I don't know what's going to happen. I think we've got a good squad, and I think we're going to go down there and compete, but you never know. But if nothing else, I want to walk away from those games and the coaches over on the other side to come up and tell you, I've never played against a team that plays as hard as your guys do. To get to where you want to go, that's a huge aspect. Some guys are just blessed with God-given talent, and that's awesome. But at the same time, to get to where they're going, they're not doing it without working hard and without being aggressive, and without flying around the yard and playing hard every day. I tell our guys all the time, and this is something I look for when I go out recruiting all the time for guys. I want our guys to be dirtier before the game than their guys are after the game. In BP, we're diving around. Our guys are laying out, and they're not going to put fresh jerseys on before the game. They're going to wear the same thing. They're going to suit up, and they're going to go get after somebody for 9 innings. That's what I look for in players that come into, and that's the biggest piece of advice I can give is regardless of what kind of game you're having, regardless of anything that happens, that's a huge thing. I can't tell you how many guys I've gone back to Coach Chef after seeing him on the road and said, you know what, he really didn't do a lot, but the guy plays hard. That'll make me come back and see him another time. If the guy doesn't play hard and doesn't really do anything, you're kind of moving on. But if he gives you something, it's like, man, that guy gets after it. I love the way that kid plays. I'll come back and see that kid again and see what happens because those are the guys our program's going to be built around. And, I think nowadays people worry too much about what color shoelaces they have and how many wristbands they have on and how many times they tape their wrists and all that stuff. Well, man, I want the kid that doesn't care what he's got on. He's covered in dirt from head to toe and is getting after it. So the more guys that can keep that going, man, the better it's going to be.
Outstanding. That's great stuff. I appreciate it. I just want to say thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate everything. Thanks for joining us at home. That's our Mideast Sunday conversation. Thanks.